I wish I could give my kids a better living.
Welcome to Q&A, and today we will be discussing single parents and poverty. The group of single parents and dependent children under 8 years old at a high risk of poverty. Single parent families include either the biological mother or father independently raising children without the biological or caregiving partner in residence. The Australian Bureau of Statistics in 2013 recorded that 15% of Australian families are sole parent families, with 65% living with children and half of these with children aged between 0 and 9. The Household Income and Labour Dynamics in Australia found that in 2008, 26.7% of sole parent families experienced poverty, defined by earning household income below 50% of the median income, compared to 7.9% of two-parent families. The risk of poverty graph by the Australian Council of Social Services shows that single-parent families have a higher risk of poverty and 1/4 live below the poverty line. Single parents with dependent children under 8 years are at high risk of income poverty and deep and persistent disadvantage. In 2010, approximately 11% of single parents experienced deep and persistent social exclusion. There are two causes of poverty among single parents I would like to identify. Firstly, according to Lister's Feminisation of Poverty ideology, single mothers encounter a high risk of poverty. This is because women tend to sacrifice their needs for those of their family, including reducing activity in the labour market due to maternal care and unpaid domestic work. Women who do not independently earn an income and rely on a provider are at risk of poverty if relationship breakdown occurs. Secondly, employment among single parents has a direct relationship to the age of their children. The ABS states that employment levels were generally lower with younger, more dependent children under 8 years old. According to Hilda data, lone parents have higher rates of joblessness, and approximately 50% of children living with lone parents were in jobless households for at least 3 years. Although 45% of single parents do work within the paid workforce, the remaining 130,000 with school-aged children feel finding secure employment is difficult with demands of dependent children, and this leads to financial deprivation and poverty. So next we will have Robin discussing welfare payments for single parents. So what benefit does the Australian government welfare system offer for single or lone parents?
The primary welfare benefit for single parents with children under 8 years is the parenting payment for singles. The benefit amount varies depending on income and assets. The maximum rate is $669.90 per fortnight, which equates to $334.95 per week. An income over $176.60 per fortnight reduces payment by 40 cents in the dollar, and a maximum fortnightly income to still receive part payment is $1,959.60.
So what are the eligibility criteria for the single parent payment?
Parents or recipients must be single and care for a child under 8. They must pass the Centrelink income and assets test. Recipients must be Australian residents and have been an Australian resident for a period or periods totaling 104 weeks.
What additional payment assistance does Centrelink system offer with single parent payments?
Centrelink also offers rent assistance, mobility allowance, telephone allowance, pharmaceutical allowance, pensioner education supplements, childcare payments, and other annual bonus payments.
Okay, and lastly, from the perspective of the current government under a largely neoliberal policy, how does the single parent payment policy reduce or alleviate poverty?
The government intervenes with monetary assistance at a basic level to this group, as they are a highly vulnerable group at risk of poverty. The intention of this rightist ideology under the neoliberal agenda is to alleviate inequality of opportunity, and at this basic level, the single parent payment is successful. However, this assistance can encourage dependency on the state. Welfare dependency is a product of exaggerated redistribution and hefty government intervention in social welfare. The parent payment allows a hand up for single parents until they are able to rejoin the workforce and to assist parents financially in combination with a work income. Parenting payment may not provide for non-essential basic goods or cover the full cost of services and living expenses. However, the focus of welfare under the Liberal influence government is to offer basic assistance. The single parenting payment, combined with rental assistance, takes the lone parent household above the poverty line referenced in the ACOS 2013 Poverty in Australia report. It is the belief of the neoliberal ideology that offering excessive welfare contributes to welfare dependency and is adverse to the capitalist model of contribution to liberal economic structure. According to the 2014 Hilda survey, 10% of the population have 50% of their income provided through government payment, In my perspective, this signifies a welfare system creating a dependency state.
Now that we've heard the government perspective, let's look at some experiences of single parents in poverty. Louisa, what are some inequalities and experiences of single families?
Well, in running this support group for 3 years now, I've found that the lone parent's main concern for their child is shielding them from poverty. A couple of months ago, a single mother named Meredith attended the support group. Meredith's parent payment recently changed to New Start Allowance as her son turned 8. She has immediately felt the impact of this change as she can no longer afford the $15 for her son to attend the co-curriculum activity gymnastics, which is once a week. Meredith is also undertaking studies 4 days a week, which she is hoping will lead her and her son out of poverty. However, she's worried she'll have to withdraw as she can no longer afford it anymore. And with that, she feels she'll no longer be able to protect her son from the impact of poverty.
I'd like to give some insight into how the payment and can impact the families. So, as Lisa has mentioned, the children are largely affected by the low income from the single parent payment, and it has been well established that there is a correlation between the low income and child's school performance. Not only that, but also children are feeling more excluded because they can't afford school excursions, they cannot afford all the equipment that's sometimes necessary. And from my interviews with parents, I also found out that they struggle with a lot of health problems. Just to give you an example, there is a father who lived in a metro area in Melbourne who had to move to Bendigo because he simply could not afford living expenses, rent and food. And as a result of that, his opportunities for healthcare and other services were reduced. His financial situation did not improve, but for example, he mentioned to me that he hasn't been to a dentist for about 10 years, and he generally has a disability, and he cannot really get any rehabilitation or any kind of treatment for that either. 25% of single parents, according to the Anglican Social Services Group, suffer from depression or anxiety, and that obviously very negatively impacts the whole family well-being because mental health issues prevent people from starting work. Some factors that might be driving parents into poverty and how really the situation is much worse off compared to other groups who receive Centrelink payments. According to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, cost of childcare for a 3-year-old is on average $12,630 per annum. And that, because of the such high cost, that forces parents to stay at home and withdraw from the workforce. So it's a choice between the children and own career. Secondly, single parents depend on welfare on average for 12 years. This research comes from Rob Gregory, who belongs to the Australian Institute of Family Studies, and that's his own private estimate within his own research. And the figure of 12 years is an on and off welfare dependency. However, it's pretty high, considering that in theory a single parent should be on welfare for about 7 years until the child reaches the proper school age. When parents lose the capability of receiving the parental payment, is definitely the high cost of raising a child in a primary school, which varies between $5,490 and $7,390.
Just to summarise, Louisa, how are lone parents' lives impacted?
Well, with 1 in 4 children who live with a lone parent being in poverty, this means that along with not being able to send their child to co-curricular activities, as they are just making ends meet not to pay bills and rent, some lone families are also unable to send their child or children to school excursions and camps. A few of the members in the group also talked about how they struggle with the essentials such as heating and cooling, dental care, being too far away from transport, sending their children to school in worn-out clothes and also without being bathed. There is also the stress of having a job to produce income whilst looking after your child, with some lone families have to weigh up the cost of childcare and whether or not it is worth staying out of the workforce to look after the child.
Lastly, we have Chrissy, who will be talking about how and why are single parents affected by inequality and poverty.
Single parents are affected by inequality because they are grouped as those who already struggle to support their children and themselves. Everyone earns the right to have some sort of financial help from the government if they need it. However, the government keeps cutting payments, which has major impacts on families. In an article I found in The Australian in 2013, Jenny Macklin, an Australian politician, stated that unfortunately we have too many people, children, growing up in Australia in families where nobody is working. That the more people go back to work, the better. Macklin has no idea what some of these families go through in their day-to-day lives. Macklin is living on a comfortable weekly wage, and so how is it fair for her to think that lone families have it easy as her? I'm sure that parents don't choose to live off welfare, as every parent wants to see their child or children succeed in life and not go through the struggles that they go through. The government, in particular the Treasurer, has a decent yearly wage, so how does he know what it's like to live off a certain amount of money without having anything extra for the basic needs of a family? How is cutting welfare payments treating Australians equally? This relates to the elements of social class, as the Treasurer has more money and more power compared to parents. As for poverty, some lone families receive a payment from the government, but it's still not enough. The more that the government cuts welfare payments, the more chances that these lone families will be heading in the direction of poverty. Macklin's aim was to try and push single parents to work rather than depend on welfare.
That concludes our session.